Have you ever noticed how a single compliment can brighten your entire day? Someone praises your work. Someone likes your photo. Someone tells you they admire you. For a brief moment, you feel lighter, more confident, more certain about yourself. But then something curious happens. The feeling fades. A few hours later, or perhaps the next morning, you find yourself looking for another compliment, another sign that you're doing well, another indication that people approve of you. It's almost as if confidence leaks away unless someone else keeps refilling it. Why? Why do human beings spend so much of their lives chasing approval from people who often aren't thinking about them nearly as much as they imagine? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Everyone likes being appreciated. Everyone enjoys hearing kind words. There's nothing unusual about that. But the deeper question isn't why compliments feel good. The deeper question is why they sometimes become necessary. Why does silence suddenly feel uncomfortable? Why can one critical comment outweigh 20 positive ones? Why does a stranger's opinion sometimes linger in your mind longer than your own? Modern psychology suggests that the need for validation begins much earlier than most people realize. Long before careers, long before relationships, long before social media. It begins in childhood. Imagine a small child learning how the world works. When they smile, someone smiles back. When they cry, someone comforts them. When they accomplish something, adults celebrate. Little by little, the child's nervous system begins connecting attention with safety, connection with survival, approval with belonging. This isn't manipulation, it's biology. Human infants are among the most dependent creatures on Earth. Unlike many animals that can survive shortly after birth, a human child depends entirely upon other people. For years. That dependence shapes the developing brain. From an evolutionary perspective, being accepted by your group wasn't simply pleasant, it was essential. A child who maintained close social bonds had a much greater chance of surviving than one who became isolated. Your brain still carries traces of that ancient programming. Thousands of years later, the environment has changed dramatically. But the nervous system has changed much more slowly. Today, being criticized on the internet doesn't threaten your survival. Receiving fewer likes on a photo doesn't reduce your chances of finding food. Being disagreed with during a meeting isn't the same as being abandoned by your tribe. Yet your emotional system often reacts as though those situations carry much greater danger than they actually do. This helps explain something that confuses many people. Why does rejection hurt so much? Psychologists have discovered that social rejection activates many of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. That doesn't mean emotional pain and physical injury are identical, but it does suggest something important. Your brain treats social connection as something worth protecting, very seriously, which means every compliment becomes a small signal that you're still accepted. Every criticism becomes a possible warning. Every ignored message, every delayed reply, every awkward silence. Your mind immediately begins asking questions. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? Did I embarrass myself? Do they like someone else more? Notice what your brain is doing. It isn't searching for truth. It's searching for reassurance. And reassurance has a peculiar characteristic. It rarely lasts. Someone tells you you're intelligent. For a while, you feel secure. Then you encounter one difficult problem. Suddenly you wonder whether they were mistaken. Someone praises your appearance. The next day you notice one small imperfection. Now the compliment feels less convincing. Someone says you're successful. Then another person achieves something greater. Instantly, comparison begins. The external approval hasn't actually changed. What changed was your relationship with it. Because validation behaves much like sugar. It creates a temporary emotional high. But if it becomes your primary source of self-worth, you'll eventually need another dose. And another. And another. This is the hidden trap. Most people believe they're chasing confidence. In reality, they're often chasing temporary relief from self-doubt. And relief always fades, which means the search begins again. The strange part is that the more dependent you become on external validation, the less powerful each piece of validation becomes. Because your brain quickly adapts. Yesterday's compliment becomes today's expectation. Today's praise becomes tomorrow's baseline. Soon, what once felt extraordinary simply feels normal. And once normal arrives, the mind quietly asks for something more. Not because you're ungrateful, not because you're vain, but because external validation was never designed to create lasting inner security. It can encourage you, it can comfort you, it can motivate you, but it cannot permanently answer one question. Who are you when nobody is applauding? If approval feels so good, why doesn't it last? Why can someone compliment you in the morning, yet by evening you're already wondering whether they still think the same thing? This question reveals one of the most important ideas in psychology. External validation isn't designed to become permanent. It's designed to be temporary feedback. The problem begins when feedback becomes identity. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. Now imagine that instead of seeing yourself directly, the mirror only reflects what other people currently think about you. One person admires you. The reflection becomes brighter. Someone criticizes you. The reflection immediately changes. Another person ignores you. The image becomes uncertain again. Eventually, you realize something unsettling. You no longer know what you actually look like. You're only seeing shifting reflections. Many people unknowingly live this way. Their self-image changes depending on who they're standing in front of. Confident around people who admire them. Quiet around people they want to impress. Anxious around people they believe are judging them. It's almost like carrying hundreds of invisible mirrors everywhere they go, and every mirror tells a slightly different story. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it a name. Epictetus often reminded his students that other people's opinions belong to other people, not because opinions never matter, but because they are never completely under your control. If your peace depends on something you cannot control, then your peace becomes unstable by definition. Think about social media. You post a photo. At first, you aren't thinking about numbers. Then the first notification arrives, a second, a third. Without noticing, your attention shifts. You're no longer asking whether you enjoyed sharing the moment. You're asking whether enough people approved of it. The experience quietly changes. Instead of expressing yourself, you begin performing for an audience. Psychologists sometimes describe this as contingent self-worth. Your value begins depending on conditions. I'll feel good if enough people like me. I'll feel successful if enough people praise my work. I'll feel attractive if enough strangers approve of my appearance. Notice what happens. Every condition places your emotional state into someone else's hands. Your confidence becomes rented instead of owned. And rented confidence always carries anxiety, because anything borrowed can disappear. This also explains why criticism feels so powerful. Imagine receiving 50 positive comments. Then one person says something negative. Which comment stays in your mind? For most people, it's the criticism. This isn't because humans enjoy suffering. It's because your brain naturally pays more attention to potential threats than positive signals. Evolution favored organisms that noticed danger. Missing one compliment rarely threatened survival. Ignoring one possible threat sometimes did. Your nervous system still operates with that ancient priority. One negative opinion can feel more psychologically important than dozens of positive ones. Not because it's more accurate, simply because your brain treats uncertainty as urgent. Now consider another strange habit. People often believe that enough success will finally silence their insecurity. When I get promoted, when I earn more money, when I become more attractive, when more people recognize my work, then I'll finally stop needing approval. But history tells a different story. Many successful people remain deeply afraid of criticism. Many famous people constantly monitor public opinion. Many accomplished professionals quietly wonder whether they're about to be exposed as frauds. Achievement doesn't automatically eliminate insecurity. Sometimes it simply raises the stakes. The more your identity depends upon admiration, the more frightening the possibility of losing admiration becomes. This creates a psychological treadmill. Every accomplishment briefly reduces insecurity. Then the mind adapts. Soon, yesterday's achievement becomes today's expectation. You don't feel successful anymore. You feel responsible for repeating success. The chase continues. This is why external validation can become addictive. Not because approval itself is harmful, but because the relief it provides is temporary. And temporary relief often encourages another search for relief. The Stoics offered an alternative. Instead of asking, "What do other people think about me?" they asked, "What kind of person am I becoming?" Those two questions may sound similar, but psychologically, they point in completely different directions. One depends upon spectators. The other depends upon character. One changes every time public opinion changes. The other changes only when your actions change. And perhaps that's where genuine confidence quietly begins. Can you ever completely stop caring what other people think? Probably not. And perhaps that was never the goal. Human beings are social creatures. We naturally care about relationships. We naturally notice approval. We naturally feel disappointment when someone misunderstands us. The Stoics never argued that emotions should disappear. They argued that emotions should stop becoming dictators. There is an important difference. Imagine learning to sail. You cannot control the wind. You cannot command the waves. But you can learn not to panic every time the weather changes. Other people's opinions are remarkably similar. You cannot control who admires you. You cannot control who criticizes you. You cannot control who misunderstands your intentions. Trying to manage every opinion is like trying to control the wind itself. Exhausting. And ultimately, impossible. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that reputation belongs to other people. Character belongs to you. That single distinction changes everything. Because reputation is unstable. Character is practiced. Reputation depends upon interpretation. Character depends upon action. Reputation can disappear overnight. Character remains available every morning. Imagine finishing a project. One person praises it. Another dislikes it. A third never notices it at all. Which opinion is the correct one? Perhaps none of them completely are. Each person sees your work through the lens of their own experiences, preferences, expectations, and emotional state. You are never interacting with objective reality. You are interacting with countless personal interpretations. Once you truly understand this, something begins to loosen. You stop trying to become universally admired, because you realize such a person has never existed. Every philosopher had critics. Every artist had doubters. Every inventor had skeptics. Every leader disappointed someone. Universal approval has always been impossible. Yet millions continue chasing it as though one more achievement will finally earn permanent acceptance. It never does, because the finish line keeps moving. Today you want acceptance from strangers. Tomorrow you want admiration. After that, respect. Then influence. Then legacy. The mind simply creates another condition. This is what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. Human beings adapt surprisingly quickly to positive experiences. The promotion becomes normal. The larger house becomes ordinary. The higher salary becomes expected. The praise that once felt extraordinary slowly becomes the minimum. Soon the mind begins searching again. Not because happiness was false, but because adaptation is part of being human. The same mechanism that allows people to recover from hardship also prevents achievements from producing permanent satisfaction, which means lasting peace cannot depend upon constantly accumulating external approval. It must come from somewhere quieter. Modern psychology often describes this as intrinsic self-worth. Your value isn't something you earn each morning. It isn't awarded by popularity. It isn't measured by applause. It isn't canceled by criticism. It exists before anyone comments. That doesn't mean ignoring feedback. Feedback is valuable. Constructive criticism helps us improve. Wise advice helps us grow. The difference is that feedback informs your behavior. It doesn't define your identity. One mistake doesn't make you incompetent. One rejection doesn't make you unworthy. One embarrassing moment doesn't become your entire story. They're experiences, not definitions. Perhaps this is why some of the calmest people you've ever met aren't necessarily the most admired. They're simply no longer negotiating their worth with every person they meet. They still appreciate compliments. They still feel disappointment. They still enjoy being understood. But they no longer require constant confirmation that they deserve to exist. That quiet shift changes everything. You speak more honestly. You make decisions more freely. You become less afraid of disappointing people. Not because you've become selfish, but because you've stopped confusing approval with identity. The strange irony is that people who stop desperately seeking validation often become more authentic. And authenticity naturally attracts deeper respect than performance ever could. Because people can usually sense the difference. One person is trying to be liked. The other is simply trying to be honest. Only one of those creates lasting peace. Perhaps the real goal was never becoming someone whom everyone admires. Perhaps it was becoming someone who no longer needs every room to vote on their worth. Because eventually, every compliment fades. Every criticism passes. Every opinion changes. Public attention moves on. But the relationship you have with yourself follows you everywhere. And maybe that has been the answer all along. The moment your self-worth no longer depends on applause is the moment silence stops feeling threatening. Because when you no longer need permission to believe in your own value, you become free in a way no compliment could ever provide.